Hey, as promised, I'm coming back at you, everybody, with the fact sheet, the Biden-Harris administration record. All the information the mainstream media refused to give to you. And in lieu of giving you all this information, what they did during the years that Joe Biden was in office was they continually picked on him and bullied him and bashed him and hid all his accomplishments and downplayed his accomplishments and focused on Donald effing Trump. Let us begin. Joseph R. Biden Jr., 46th President of the United States, 2021 to 2025. Fact sheet. The Biden-Harris administration record. Historic recovery. When President Biden took office, the country was in the midst of the worst pandemic in more than a century and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Nearly 1 million workers had lost their jobs. COVID-19 was wreaking havoc on our country, closing businesses, keeping kids out of school, and killing thousands of Americans every day. Starting on his first day in office, President Biden took decisive action to beat the pandemic. On President Biden's first day in office, he released a national strategy for the COVID-19 response to vaccinate the nation and stood up the largest free vaccination program in the country's history. The Biden-Harris administration mobilized 90,000 vaccination locations, stood up dozens of federally run mass vaccination sites, and deployed over 9,000 federal personnel to support vaccinations nationwide. President Biden set an ambitious goal to get 100 million vaccines in people in 100 days. The administration reached this goal in half the time and then achieved 200 million vaccines within 100 days. 230 million Americans are vaccinated, up from 3.5 million when President Biden took office. Relief through the American Rescue Plan. President Biden's American Rescue Plan changed the country's economic trajectory through targeted relief to meet the urgent needs of American communities, leading to the strongest jobs recovery on record and a world-leading economic performance. The American Rescue Plan included these: investment of about $160 billion to provide the supplies, emergency response, testing, and public health workforce to stop the spread of COVID. Provided critical relief to more than 15,000 school districts to reopen safely and support student well-being and academic recovery. Delivered immediate support for families hard hit by the pandemic, including extending enhanced unemployment insurance benefits and eligibility for millions of Americans temporarily out of the workforce, lowering taxes for working Americans by increasing the earned income tax credit for 17 million workers, and providing $1,400 per person checks for most Americans. Delivered assistance to help over 8 million hard-pressed renters stay in their homes, and kept eviction filings below historic averages in the aftermath of the pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of homeowners at risk of losing their homes also received assistance through the American Rescue Plan's Homeowner Assistance Fund to help prevent mortgage delinquencies and defaults, foreclosures, and losses of utilities and home energy services. Provided a historic expansion of the child tax credit, leading to the lowest child poverty rate in American history in 2021. Created the first ever summer nutrition benefit, helping the families of 30 million children nationwide who rely on free and reduced price school meals to afford food over the summer. delivered historic investments to help over 225,000 child care programs remain open, lowering costs for millions of families and helping speed the return to work of hundreds of thousands of mothers. Provided direct fiscal relief to every state and territory and 30,000 cities and towns, enabling critical investments in housing, workforce, public safety, and water and high-speed internet infrastructure. Lowered or eliminated health insurance premiums for millions of lower and middle-income families enrolled in health insurance marketplaces, leading to record-breaking health insurance coverage nationwide. Delivered more than $28 billion in emergency relief to help 100,000 restaurants and other food and beverage businesses open during the pandemic. Powered a small business recovery and boom, including through an historic investment in the State Small Business Credit Initiative to catalyze tens of billions of dollars in private investment and new small business financing and support for up to 100,000 small businesses over the next decade. Growing the economy and lowering costs. President Biden and Vice President Harris were determined not only to support a strong recovery, but also to build a stronger and fairer economy for the future. Before the president signed the American Rescue Plan into law, experts at the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office projected that the unemployment rate would stay above 4% until the end of 2025. The Biden-Harris administration crossed that threshold 3 years early, and the United States economy even outperformed their final pre-pandemic forecast for economic growth, job growth, and incomes, with the economy now larger than experts projected it would be without the pandemic. It's pretty big. Over President Biden's time in office, the economy added 16.6 million jobs, and gross domestic product grew 12.6%. The Biden-Harris administration is the only administration in history to have created jobs every single month. The administration achieved the lowest average unemployment in 50 years, 50, with record low unemployment rates for Black Americans, Latino Americans, women, veterans, workers without a high school diploma, and workers with disabilities. The share of working-age Americans in the workforce reached its highest level in 2 decades, and the share of working-age women in the workforce hit a record high. The strong labor market led to better pay and working conditions. After-tax incomes increased by nearly $4,000, accounting for inflation, and real wages grew most quickly for low-wage workers. This is the strongest recovery for real wage growth in 50 years. Wealth, adjusted for inflation, rose a record 37% for the median American household. Americans filed a record 21 million new small business applications, the most in any presidential administration in history. This small business growth was particularly strong among Black and Latino small business owners, with Black business ownership doubling since 2019 and hitting a 30-year high for Latino families. Investing in America. While this economic recovery was historic, President Biden and Vice President Harris believed the country could not just go back to the economy. Could not just go back to the economy that it had before the pandemic. Rather, they believed the country needed a fundamental break from the trickle-down economics that have left so many families vulnerable and so many communities hollowed out. Instead, they set off to grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. President Biden's Investing in America agenda, the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act is making smart public investments all across the country to catalyze additional private sector investments, increasing growth and American economic competitiveness. To date, President Biden's Investing in America agenda has helped attract over $1 trillion in announced private sector investments in clean energy and manufacturing, and created over 1.6 million construction and manufacturing jobs. Bipartisan infrastructure law. On November 15, 2021, President Biden signed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, a once-in-a-generation investment in America's infrastructure and competitiveness. Since then, the Biden-Harris administration has broken ground on projects to rebuild our roads and bridges, upgrade transit and rail, modernize ports and airports, deliver clean and safe water, clean up legacy pollution, expand access to high-speed internet, lower energy costs, and build a clean energy economy. President Biden delivered an infrastructure decade that is unlocking access to economic opportunity, creating good-paying jobs, boosting domestic manufacturing, and building the foundation for durable shared growth. To date, the Biden-Harris administration has announced nearly $600 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding and launched over 72,000 specific infrastructure projects and awards. This included improvements on over 200,000 miles of roads and over 12,000 bridge repairs and projects, launching over 2,400 drinking water and wastewater projects across the country, replacing nearly 500,000 lead pipes, benefiting over 1.2 million people. Funding to deploy nearly 4,600 low and zero-emission American-made transit buses and over 8,900 clean school buses in over 1,300 communities across the country. Funding nearly 450 rail projects as part of the largest investment since Amtrak was created more than 50 years ago. Funding for over 1,000 port and waterway projects to strengthen supply chains. Investments in over 400 projects to modernize and expand airport terminals, over 200 of which are under construction or complete. Removing hazardous fuel material from nearly 18 million acres of land to mitigate the impact of wildfires. Enabling over 23 million low-income households to access free or discounted high-speed internet service. Plugging nearly 9,600 orphaned oil and gas wells to address legacy pollution. The work continued. Over the next decade, President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law that he put in place at the time was slated to do this: replace every lead pipe in the country, connect every home and small business to affordable, reliable high-speed internet, improve over 350,000 miles of roads, enough to circle the globe 14 times, repair or rebuild more than a dozen of the nation's most economically significant bridges, and replace tens of thousands of smaller bridges across the country, build the country's first high-speed rail corridors, and transform Amtrak with an all-new fleet, modernized stations, and upgraded infrastructure. Improve transportation options for millions of Americans and reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the largest investment in public transit in United States history. Delivered over 1,000 projects at airports and ports to strengthen our supply chains and prevent future disruptions. Install EV chargers on major highway corridors every 50 miles and in communities all across America. Upgrade power infrastructure to deliver clean, reliable energy across the country and deploy cutting-edge energy technology to achieve a zero-emissions future. Make infrastructure resilient against the impacts of climate change, cyber attacks, and extreme weather events. To be continued on the next video. It's a long, long list of achievements. Be back soon.